Hi there, my name is Dr. Katie Saints, and this video is about processing our emotions. We all have emotions, it's part of being human, and it's really important we process them. If we don't process our emotions, it's likely to lead to behavior patterns that are going to sabotage our relationships and our goals. Plus, research shows if we try to stuff our emotions and we don't process them, they actually increase in intensity, duration, and frequency. So it just means we're going to feel them stronger and longer. So I want to walk you through 6 steps that help you process your emotions and helps you evaluate your behaviors to see if your behaviors are helping you or hurting you. So before I do that, I want you to come up with an example of a time recently that you had a strong emotional response to something and maybe it didn't go so well. So maybe your family members were frustrated with you, or maybe you accidentally sabotaged some of your goals because you were so upset. So go ahead and think of something like that and we'll talk through those 6 steps. Okay, so number 1 is just identify the event. So what was it that made you so upset? What was frustrating or anxiety producing that really got your emotions going sky high? Like, what happened? Okay, then I want you to identify the emotions. Sometimes we feel multiple emotions at once. So maybe you were sad and angry and insecure. Try to identify as many emotions as you can. Then I want you to look at what was the behavioral response. What I mean by that is, what did you do with your emotions? Did you shout? Did you yell? Did you shut down and not talk at all? What sort of behaviors did you do in response to these emotions? And then what I want you to evaluate, which this one can be kind of hard, is with those behaviors, what were you trying to accomplish? So for example, a lot of times when I have strong emotional responses, I shut down, I stop talking, I get quiet. And for me, that's kind of escape behavior. I want people to leave me alone and just give me space. But I'm not communicating that I need space. So it's really not that effective. I need to come up with something that I can say to my loved ones so they know, like, hey, I'm having a hard time right now and I just need a little bit of space. So try and evaluate what you were trying to accomplish with your behaviors. What were you doing and what were you hoping the outcome would be? How did you hope people would respond? What did you think you would get out of it? Okay, so now I want you to evaluate if it was effective. Did it help you? Did it hurt you? How did it impact your relationships? Did it build them or did it push people away? Did people end up getting pretty frustrated with you? So go ahead and list what some of the consequences were, good and bad. How did it help you? What worked? What didn't work? Then what I want you to look at is what you could have done differently. So the example that I wanted you to come up with was one that maybe didn't go so well, so that we can look at areas to improve and grow in. So thinking about how you felt, because it's okay you felt that way. It's okay to be frustrated, to be sad, to be mad, anxious. Those feelings are okay. It's our behaviors that get us in trouble. So spend some time thinking about, what could I do instead to deal with those emotions that helps my relationship and doesn't sabotage any of my goals? So go ahead and pause the video right now and take some time to talk through all of these steps and really have some honest reflection. Ask somebody for help if you're having a hard time coming up with examples or answers to these 6 steps, and then come on back. All right, so the next part of this video that I want to focus on is, how to process our emotions when they're so big and it's really hard to control our behaviors. So it's really, really important that we get in a habit of pausing before we respond when we're feeling something really strong. So typically, if we don't pause, if we just bam, response, if we just respond immediately, a lot of times we're going to regret the behaviors that we made. So we really, really need to get into a habit of pausing, taking a deep breath. And so, one question I want you to think about when you're having a strong emotional response to something is this a problem that I can solve? So there's kind of two different routes you have to take. If it's a problem you can solve, then you need to start focusing on solutions. But there's a lot of things that frustrate us that we can't solve. Other people's behaviors, the weather, there's all these things that are outside of our control that we can't solve. And if that's the case, it's our job to work on accepting them, being chill about it, letting it go, and that can be hard. So okay, step one, pause. Think about if you can solve it or not. Think about if it's outside of your control. So if you can solve it, go into solution mode. Seek help. Focus on building your relationships and meeting your goals. Think about what sort of things would sabotage that. But if you can't solve it and you have to just accept it, then what I want you to do is take a minute to calm your body down. So one of my favorite activities to get my head in the right space is to take some deep breaths. And while I'm taking those deep breaths, I close my eyes and I just think about a really positive, vivid memory. So the more details that you focus on, the more that memory is going to come alive in your head. So focusing on how you felt, focusing on what people said, focusing on trying to remember every little detail, even like your five senses. What did you feel? What did you see? What did you hear? Were there any tastes or smells? Try to get back to that moment as much as you possibly can. So while you're doing that, you just sit back, you take deep breaths, and you picture this beautiful moment. So that sort of thing can get your head into a much more positive space. And then your body's calmed down. Typically your heart rate is going to be calmer. And that means your brain is working better and you can use your prefrontal cortex again. Because when our emotions are high, it kind of cuts off access to our prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of our brain that helps us make really good decisions. And that's the part of our brain that protects us from screwing ourselves over with really strong emotions. So then, once you've calmed yourself down doing that activity, then you can think about, okay, what can I do right now that's going to help me move forward? So one thing that is a good habit for every person alive to do is come up with a list of activities that are really good for distractions. So before we move on to that though, I want you to just practice that calming activity. Go ahead and pause the video and take deep breaths, pick a really awesome memory to focus on, and try to remember it in as much detail as possible. And I want you to think about, how did you feel before you started doing that, and how did you feel after? Did it actually calm your body down? Sometimes we pick the wrong memory and it causes the wrong emotional response. So try and pick one of your favorite memories that's really positive. Okay, go ahead and pause the movie and come on back. All right, so the last thing I want to do together is focus on these value activities that you can do instead when you have a problem that is outside of your control and you need to just kind of move on and let it go. So what I want you to do is think about what's important to you. So what's important to people varies a lot. So for some people, having fun is super important to them. Some people really like clean spaces. Some people really crave quality time with their family. So try and come up with 4 things that you really think is important, that you really value, that when I do these things, it makes me happy, it makes me feel good about myself. Okay? So pause the video and come up with those 4 things. Then come back and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so you have your 4 things that are important to you, that you really value. Now what I want you to do is come up with 4 behaviors for each that you can do. So for example, say you picked family. Spending time with family is something that's really important to you. So some activities that you could put on your list is text a family member, play a game with a family member, go ask your family member if they would cook a meal with you, go on a walk with your family member. So those are the kinds of things I want you to come up with. Let's say you picked having fun as a value. Okay, what are activities that are fun for you? Maybe you picked working out, so you could do push-ups, go for a walk, go for a run, jump on the trampoline, have a dance party. So it doesn't matter what the activities are as long as they line up with your values. Because when we do things that line up with our values, it actually releases dopamine into our body and it releases serotonin. So these chemicals help us make us feel good about life, and they motivate us and they fight depression and anxiety. So if we're doing value-based activities, it's going to be easier to get our emotions in a good place, and it's going to be easier to let go of those things that we can't control. Alrighty, so go ahead and turn off this video and make that list and post it somewhere on your wall, in your room, somewhere where you're going to see it. Because a lot of times when our emotions are heightened, it is really hard to think of something to do instead. Because remember, we don't have full access to our prefrontal cortex when our emotions are super, super heightened. So it is literally hard to think of those activities. So if you have this plastered on your wall, then you don't have to think about it. You have a visual for you. So when your brain's not working well, you have this reminder. So find a good place where you can put this list so that you can see it all the time. So it's actually helpful to you when you need it in those heightened moments. All right, thanks so much for listening.